I modded the friendship-ruining board game Monopoly into the even more friendship-ruining video board game Fortune Street. Compared to my other modding projects, this one wasn't nearly as painful as the others. Yet even with all the advancements that have been made in the game's modding community, this project still ended up being difficult, but for much different reasons than you might expect. Today we'll be taking a deep dive into the methodology of creating a custom Fortune Street board, the hidden art of board design, and how I wasted more than 3 hours of the spare time of my friends in my pursuit of perfection. That's right, it's time for another episode of Game Modding Pain. It goes without saying at this point that these videos take a long time to produce. Most of the time it's because making the mod itself is an extremely laborious process, but sometimes the reason is that I don't have any ideas I can act on. For example, I would really like to revisit Tower Unite for another episode, but that idea requires the release of a specific update, which Pixeltel Games has been teasing for ages, but has yet to release. So what am I supposed to do until then to fill the gap? Well, not too long ago, I rediscovered Fortune Street, a video board game franchise that has only been published outside of Japan once, being the late 2011 release for the Nintendo Wii. It is super underrated, having incredibly solid gameplay, as well as a large collection of recognizable characters and locations from the Mario and Dragon Quest series. It's developed such a cult following that there is an entire Discord server dedicated to creating mods for it, such as cheat codes to improve the gameplay and brand new boards and characters to try out. They've even developed several desktop applications that make modding Fortune Street that much easier, and that's why there won't be as much pain in the traditional sense this time around, especially when compared to the other episodes. But before I go ahead and detail the steps I took to create Monopoly in this game, I should walk all of you through the basics first, just so we're all on the same page. When you boot up the game, Fortune Street lets you choose between easy and standard rules, and if you choose easy, you're playing the game wrong and will be cast into the fires of hell. That's just an objective fact. I will assume for the rest of this video that you have picked standard. Once you get into a board, you'll see a whole array of properties and spaces with various colors that could make your head spin. But what you'll find is that this game can easily be explained through its similarities to Monopoly, so I'll be doing precisely that. Everyone starts on the go space, or in this case, the bank. They then roll dice to travel around the board in any direction they choose and land on properties to buy them out. The more properties you own in a single district, the more valuable they become. And you can also choose to invest gold in your properties to increase their rent price, a feature that replaces houses and hotels. Along the way, you need to collect one of each of the 4 suits, and then return to the bank to get a promotion salary. Do this several times, and eventually your net worth will hit the target amount. The first player to make it to the bank with a net worth higher than the target is the winner, or if someone goes bankrupt, it'll be the player with the highest net worth at that point. Sounds super similar to Monopoly so far, but the extra additions to the formula are what make Fortune Street the ultimate and undisputed king of property management board games. The most important of these is the stock market. Every time you pass the bank, you're given the opportunity to invest your gold in a district's stocks, and you'll get dividends from any rent payment made in that district depending on your number of stocks. If you invest enough into a single district, the value of its stocks will go up, increasing your net worth. Investments made by other players will do the same, and conversely, selling stocks will decrease those values. But for some unknowable reason, there's a regulatory loophole where if you sell no more than 9 stocks per district, none of the values will go down. This is a textbook example of stock market manipulation, which is illegal where I live according to the 2001 Corporations Act, but apparently you can get away with it in a video game just fine. They even name drop insider trading in one of the pop-ups that appears after a game is finished. If that isn't legally dubious, I don't know what is. And that's only one of the brand new features that makes Fortune Street a joy to play. There are venture cards that you draw when landing on a suit space, which are far more dynamic than the community chest and chance cards from Monopoly and can seriously screw over certain players, especially the dreaded card number 13. There's also 4 fun mini-games that hand out small rewards, 3 cameo characters that randomly appear and affect the board in various ways, vacant plots which are similar to but far more versatile than Monopoly's utilities, and plenty more spaces with unique effects that shake the game up, to the point where leading in net worth is no longer a guarantee that you'll win. Hopefully now you can see the qualities about this game that made me decide to work on this mod. Imagine the torturous but enthralling experience of playing Monopoly to its end, but in an environment where every aspect of it has been amplified, and as an added bonus, you get to see Mario characters cry when they lose lots of money. I had to see this project through to its completion, especially since it would allow me to annoy my friends in the process. But where would someone with a questionable agenda such as myself start? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are some applications that make custom board creation super easy, these being Custom Street Mod Manager, or CSMM, and Fortune Avenue. The former program is what you use to pack together all your mods and create a new version of Fortune Street with them, and we'll get to that. But for now, let's just focus on Fortune Avenue. It is the quintessential board editor for the game, allowing you to place all the spaces you want and set their districts, values, rent prices, and effects however you please. There's a couple of problems though. For one, there's no copy-paste. You can select multiple spaces at once to change their properties, but if you're wanting to copy the shape of something, no dice. You're going to have to add new squares one at a time and drag them all the way from the center to where you want them to be. With a board as simple as Monopoly's, this wasn't much of an issue, but I'm sure it's a major problem for anyone working on larger projects. Another annoying quirk with Fortune Avenue is its pathing system. In the game, connections between spaces are hard-coded into the board as waypoints, and AI characters read from these to determine where to go. Because of that, you have to design your board first, then select the autopath option from the tools section. However, autopathing selects all surrounding spaces, but I'm remaking Monopoly, where you're only supposed to be able to move in one direction. So I had to select each pair of spaces individually and connect them together using this button. Unfortunately for me, the bank doesn't let you set its waypoints this way, so I had to manually specify the space IDs in the waypoints tab. I'm just thankful I only had to do this manual operation for a couple of spaces. Overall, Fortune Avenue was more than capable of doing what I wanted out of it. The true source of problems came from translating the gameplay of Monopoly into Fortune Street. For starters, the train stations and utilities were a serious point of contention. There's no direct analog in Fortune Street that mimics these properties, which you aren't supposed to be able to invest in. I did try replacing the utilities with vacant plots, but these were easily abusable because of the variety of choices on offer, especially the tax office, which makes you pay 10% of your net worth upon landing on it, and the checkpoint, which increases its price every time it's passed and requires rent payment on pass. I just made these districts into regular properties and called it a day. If that's a problem with you, then I apologize, but there's no better way of copying their behavior while still giving their owner money. Speaking of throwing in the towel, the standard rent prices from Monopoly didn't translate perfectly either. Because you invest in properties as opposed to buying houses, I had no real control over the final rent price, as it depends on a hard-coded multiplier table operating on the base rent. With some districts, they could get wildly expensive once their max capital was invested, while with others, the rent would be so cheap that there would be no reason to buy those properties. It seems that many other board creators have had this same issue, as on the Fortune Street modding website, yes, this is really a thing, there is a district simulator that lets you test out shop values, prices, and investments to get your desired max rent. I went with a property yield of 0.1 and 0.035 for the train stations, as those yields roughly matched Monopoly's maximum rent prices. Also, getting the colors right was pretty annoying too, as districts have hard-coded colors and must be included in order. It certainly doesn't help that I'm colorblind. Do these colors look good? Because they're good enough for me. I'm not having a repeat of that tree debacle from the previous episode. With those hurdles cleared, the last step of board creation was to write up a YAML file containing absolutely everything there is to know about the board. That includes its name, description, icon, theme, gold amounts, board file, background, story mode opponents, custom music packaged with Brawl Crate, this was too easy to even warrant explaining to you, district and shop names, which I had to do twice because Monopoly has different names for its US and UK variants, and ones and zeros for all 128 possible venture cards in the game, of which exactly 64 are required to be picked. Seriously, selecting venture cards was such an annoying ordeal that I went to the effort of contributing to the Fortune Street modding website by adding an interactive page just for venture cards. Now you can filter through all of the cards and choose exactly the ones you want, and click a button to automatically generate the required YAML code for your selection. I'm so glad I made this, as it made future work on my board a whole lot easier. Developing this page was a whole can of worms itself, so don't be surprised if you see a web development episode of this series in the future. With the YAML complete, all that was left to do was open CSMM in advanced mode, import Fortune Street, and mount my YAML, specifying the location in the menu I wanted it to appear in. Now I could go ahead and export a brand new Fortune Street, and opening it up in an emulator, voila, my board is in the menu. That was actually really easy compared to all the other mods I've made for this channel. Surely there aren't any outstanding issues with it that will only be made apparent once I gather together 3 people from my Discord server and force them to play on my board, listening to the enthusiasm slowly drain from their voices as the turns tick by with no end in sight. Who am I kidding? That's exactly what happened. This should have been obvious to me from the start, but I would come to learn that a near perfect replica of the Monopoly board is not suitable for Fortune Street, and I I'd just force my longtime friends into a marathon of a game. Here is the laundry list of every issue I found during the playtest. The rent prices were so cheap that barely anything happened each lap around the board, and trading didn't come close to mitigating this issue, as the only trades that tended to go ahead were Monopoly for Monopoly trades, meaning both participants in the trade would be just as well off as each other back when they were negotiating. So the net effect on the game would be close to zero. And oh my goodness, the bonus that you get from passing Go combined with the stock market? These turned out to be the two things that made the game so agonizingly slow. Monopoly is designed around the idea that some player at some point will go bankrupt. It's an inevitability. The $200 bonus is only intended to keep players alive early on so they can continue buying properties and houses. Turns out there's a special shop bonus in Fortune Street that you earn alongside your promotion salary, which cannot be turned off. So players were always earning an extra 10% of their total shop values on top of the 200 gold. That, in combination with the stock market, which perpetually added more and more to each player's net worth, meant that bankruptcy was out of the question, and thus winning required everyone to play an annoyingly high number of turns until somebody finally got to the bank with the target amount. We didn't even have the patience to reach that point. We all collectively made the decision to go out to lunch and watched as the AI took over our characters and played much faster than we ever could. My character won, by the way, in case you were wondering, because of course it did. Capitalist Toad supremacy for life. Regardless, it was clear to me that some changes were in order, and I would not rest until I was satisfied with my work, as I have a crippling case of perfectionism. So what changes did I make for version 2? My first order of business was to fix the promotion salary, the primary cause of games lasting forever. I couldn't keep it stuck at a constant 200 gold, as that wouldn't get players any closer to the target amount, which is 20,000 by the way. So I allowed it to increase by 150 for each time someone promotes by passing the bank, meaning that if someone promotes to level 4, they would earn at minimum 650 gold. This change is sure to alleviate everyone suffering the most, but I'm not done yet. To address the rent prices being so low that even with the max capital invested, they were barely making a dent in players' wallets, I increased the property yield to 0.125 and the train stations to 0.08. The difference between 0.1 and 0.125 sounds small, but trust me, it makes all the difference once you start pumping money into a district with the total domination. However, even this wasn't enough to make the first district after the bank or the utilities worth buying. Since being only 2 properties long, these districts couldn't upgrade as much as the rest. To solve this problem, I would need to create 3 new properties out of the blue. But how could I do that without changing the board layout? That's when I looked to a house rule that has been in use in Monopoly since 2006, the speed dive. This red sucker does one of 3 things. Either it makes you move faster, warps you to the next unowned property if you roll a Mr. Monopoly, or gives you more control over your movement if you roll a bus. Taking inspiration from this tiny but wholly game-changing gimmick, I created a 6-space center area on the board with 3 of the spaces dedicated to the new properties I needed to add, which I've made into vacant plots for added chaos. On the other 3 spaces, I've placed a cycling suit so a player can farm all 4 suits really quickly, a warp to any shop the player chooses, including ones unowned, and a warp to the free parking space. And speaking of free parking, it used to be an arcade, which would make the player that landed on it play a minigame, and I originally made it this way to take advantage of a specific venture card that would warp you to it or jail based on a dice roll. However, there's no minigames in Monopoly, and actually, the free parking space is supposed to do nothing. That jackpot you get from landing on it is just a house rule, not an actual rule. But with these new properties on the board, I have to make them easily accessible so they won't stay unowned the whole game, and the randomness of the venture cards won't help with evenly distributing them. What I've done to remedy this is to turn the arcade into a switch. The first time it's pressed, the vacant plots will swap with the first property in their districts. The second time, the first properties will return and the vacant plots will instead replace the second properties. And finally, the third time will reset the vacant plots to the center area and repeat the cycle. And with that, I've covered all of the changes I made to and fully described the gameplay of the latest version of the board as of this video. So that's Monopoly in Fortune Street, a port that has changed so much from its original design that it doesn't make sense to call it a port at all. I guess my overall point here, and the moral of this story, is that I am not cut out for board game design, and only barely scraped by with this project because it was easy to throw together a prototype and test it with the software I had access to. Creating a custom board that is both fun and balanced is way more work than you would initially think, even when you're working with an already well-established game as a base. And this doesn't just apply to Fortune Street, but any type of board game. I was actually working on one in Tabletop Simulator that never saw the light of day for this exact same reason, so that just goes to prove my point. Knowing all this, I'd say that I should probably probably stick to creating simple ports and purely artistic pieces for these modding projects of mine, as opposed to playable games with lots of depth to them. But I'm a certified masochist, so who knows? Maybe I'll turn around one day and say that the time has come for me to throw my free time out the window and try making a board game again. For that and other game modding projects, you should subscribe to this channel and join my Discord server. Maybe even throw me a like and let me know in the comments what you enjoyed about the video. There's also a lot more work I do when modding that you don't typically get to see. In this instance, there's the full gameplay I filmed for this video with commentary, technically a sequel to my previous Fortune Street video. But there's loads more beyond that, including the raw project files for my Platinum Quest Marble Maze and a scrapped Sonic Roboblast 2 kart track. To see those, you can head over to my Ko-fi and make a one-time donation of as little as $1. Then you'll have access to all of that extra content through Discord and any more that I release later on. Anyway, that's the end of this little documentary on my fans' collective suffering, and this script is already too long, so I'll shove in my typical closing line to wrap things up for good. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next time.